What a beautiful way to begin an MMO experience. After a soundtrack like that, who wouldn't pick a character just to give the game a try? So, hi minions of YouTube, and welcome to my Road to Endgame video for Bless Online, in which I'm going to try my best to remember my own experience with the game and walk you through pretty much everything that happened all the way from level 1 to the point where I stopped playing the game. So there's no need to make this intro longer than it has to be. Let's start from the beginning. I'm going to try to keep this video under 20 minutes and hopefully only one part. So that being said, let's get started. My adventure started like everyone else's from the character selection screen, and in terms of a class I chose to go for the paladin. The reason for this is just simply because I was under wrong impression that I would have a character with a shield and a lance similar to the Valkyrie class in Black Desert, and only later on I learned that I'm going to be stuck with a mace for the entire duration of the game. Anyway, it was a healer class, so I actually wanted to have one of the healer classes, and since at that time and at the moment also Paladins are the only healer class in Bless Online, I just simply stuck with it until the end. Once I got my character made up, I entered the world of Bless Online. Like everyone else, I had to go to the beginner city, which in my case it was Sen. I'm not sure if this is only faction related or if it is also race related, but still, during this phase of beginner city, all I had to do was to follow the main quest line with the tailor and the mad scientist and whatever there was. But what I did remember, or I do remember, is how annoying it was to have to get used to the idea of keep having pressed the right mouse button just to move the camera properly. There were a couple of tweaks that I made to the UI, but the biggest thing that I remember from that entire part was just simply the weird way to move the camera. After a couple of hours I did get used to that mechanic, but still. Sen was kind of okay. I guess it showed me how the game looks, how the questing is going to go, how the movement works and whatever else. It didn't take me long to finish the Sen part, after which I took the balloon. It was a nice ride, I suppose. It looked kind of interesting. Too bad the loading screen goes through that balloon phase and it has to drop some frames, but still. After this balloon phase I arrived in Spezia, which is the biggest city, or let's say the main city in this game, where you will have to go every single time you want to sell something to the marketplace. The only relevant thing that I can remember from the Spezia part is meeting the cute marketplace NPC. Other than that, I just simply did the main quest line. I remember that at some point I met a player named Cookies. I attempted to start a conversation just for the fun of it because I found his name interesting. That failed. I just simply got ignored and I proceeded as if nothing had happened and continued doing the main quest line. After a while I had to leave Spezia, and I remember I took my first boat ride, my first and only boat ride in the entire game. I left the city, did some more main quests. I'm not going to go into details because I don't remember them and because it's just questing. When I got to level 11 I returned back to Spezia, and this is when I had to buy armor from the NPC for the first time myself, because I realized that I'm not going to get any armor drops or armor rewards from the main quest line. So if I want better armor I have to do the initiative myself and buy it from the NPC, otherwise I would have low gear. I don't think this is such a big deal because I don't know if other games offer you free armor during the leveling up phase, but for Bless, if you want armor you have to buy it yourself. Anyway, after this, did some more questing. Around levels 13 to 14 is when I finally attempted to tame my first mount, which was Scorpion, and funny enough, at level 14 is when I finally realized that there is a button to switch the stances. Up until level 14, I pretty much did all of the quests and all of the leveling using the first stance, and I was starting to get bored of it, and I didn't even know, even though the game told me, that there are different stances. So at level 14, I made this huge realization that, oh, there actually are more skills that I can use, and I actually don't have to keep repeating the same combos over and over. So I guess that was some form of enlightenment. Anyway, short after that, I believe around level 15 is when I got to open my first box, the low level box that offers you free stuff, and out of that you get some crystals. You will see them on the screen at the bottom of my inventory. I realized a lot later what those crystals actually are. They are supposed to be to put them inside your armor to give you special effects, but at that time I had no idea what they are. After attempting a couple of times to use them and not finding any way to make use of them, I decided later on to just simply trash them to make space in my inventory. I kind of regret that looking back. I could have had maybe better gear. I mean, I'm not sure if they make such a huge influence or not, but still. My first crystals, I trashed them. After that, let's fast forward a little bit. Actually, there's nothing to fast forward, we are still at level 15. My first dungeon followed, which it was pretty much a solo adventure. Around level 15, I started Bless without any friends playing with me, so I didn't meet anyone along the way, and so as a result, I just simply did the first dungeon solo because I found it, to be honest, pretty easy. There wasn't much in terms of a challenge, just simply lure monsters one by one, kill them one by one. When there were big rooms with more monsters, I must admit I had some troubles, my class being quite tanky and with some heals built in. It wasn't really as huge of a deal as if, I mean, in contrast to if I were a wizard or, mage, or some class that isn't as tanky, but still. My first dungeon was solo. What else do I remember about it? Oh yeah, during this first dungeon I remember I did die once at some point, but there wasn't that much of a penalty. I'm not sure if you even lose anything if you die. You just simply have to go back to the beginning of the dungeon and walk all the way back to where you died. So nothing really spectacular. After defeating the final boss of this first dungeon, I just simply killed the chest, got my loot, and proceeded to do questing, because let's be honest, who would repeat the level 15 dungeon? A lot of grinding followed up, just different types of monsters. Around this time is, I believe, when I discovered the hunting quests, and that I can actually kill the same type of monster a certain amount of time, like 10 times or 15 times, and have additional quests to follow up on. Me being kind of a person that likes to complete stuff, I kind of got addicted to these. I wouldn't leave an area if I didn't have the hunting quest completed. So for example, if I was at say 8 monsters out of 15, I would have to kill 15 until I leave. So I killed some hippos, some crocodiles if I remember around this part. Nothing spectacular, just questing, main questing, and soon after that I reached the level required for the second dungeon. This one was not a solo experience, not a party experience, but a duo experience. So along the way, pretty much at the entrance of the cave, I met a mage that invited me because obviously we had similar goals. Honestly, I would have done this dungeon solo if it wasn't for this mage, but I'm happy that we did it in duo, because the dungeon turned out to be a little bit harder than the level 15 one, and I also got to see what it feels like to be a tank. I myself being the paladin, I was the tank and the healer in the same time, while the mage was supposed to be the DPS, but I didn't really see much of a difference the difference between my damage from the paladin and the mage damage, but still, it was a nice experience to go to this dungeon together. We did some bosses, obviously, got to the end of it. The mage actually died at the final boss, so I remember that one, and I remember how it took me about 30 seconds or more to realize how to actually use the revive skill and revive the mage, so that was something that stuck in my head. After this dungeon, it's sad that this being the level 23 dungeon, it isn't really repeatable. I mean, we both did it for the main quest line just to be able to proceed, after which I myself never returned to the 23 dungeon, so it was a one-time experience. Doing some more main questing, I got to level 30, and around this time is when I experienced World PvP for the first time. I'm not sure if it unlocks at level 30, but this is when I met a ranger from the opposing faction. He was red, he tried to hit me, I tried to hit him back. After hitting a couple of times back and forth, one of us died. It wasn't me, it was the ranger, so I won this supposed duel. I was quite happy, to be honest, because up until this point I was afraid that I am a noob and I don't know how to PvP, but turns out paladins are quite strong, so that was actually my first PvP experience. Moving on after this, I did obviously more questing. I will repeat this a couple of times during this video, but yeah. I got to level 33, which is the next step for the next dungeon, and at level 33 I experienced for the first time what it feels like to be in a 5-man party in a dungeon. Needless to say, being my first full party dungeon, it failed, just because we already had a paladin before I joined, and I didn't know how to do anything besides healing, so I didn't really have a proper role. The party itself, I remember it wasn't that good anyway. We failed to do the first or second boss a couple of times, after which the party disbanded. I was, to be honest, quite sad because I felt like it was my fault that the party failed, because I was the one. You don't need 2 paladins in a party unless one of them knows how to tank, but I didn't. So in a way I feel like it was my fault that the party failed. Following after that, I did some more questing. I don't think I increased in level, but around this time I entered the Gathering dungeon for the first time. So I found on the ground a weird shining helmet, and I thought to myself, what happens if I try to loot it, because it looks quite interesting. And I looted it, and it teleported me inside the Gathering dungeon, which actually has quite a funny soundtrack, so that was nice. I gathered as much as I could. You can stay inside this dungeon for 5 minutes once the timer starts, and you have 5 minutes, I think, or 3 minutes, whichever one, to gather as much as you can from the ground, after which the items disappear. So it was an interesting experience in between the questing. This Gathering dungeon was actually nice. Following after this, since I was getting, I believe, on the levels where most people do questing, level 33 or so, I experienced a little bit more PvP, as in I would find more and more people who were red. Some of them would try to attack me. In some cases I would try to attack them just for fun, to break the boring questing experience. So there were some more PvP instances, after which let me look on my notepad and see what comes next. Oh yeah, at this point in my journey I was at the Falconeer's shelter, which is, I think, the best place in terms of a soundtrack that I've heard in the entire game. Besides the soundtrack on the character selection screen, there is this one from this area. I will put it on the screen now so you can listen it for a couple of seconds. It is, in my opinion, the best soundtrack I've heard in the entire map. This area sure was nice to stay in for the duration of my main questline. After I was done with the main questline, sadly I had to leave and move on, but shortly after I met an interesting place around the area where the Imperial Egg Hunters spawn. You will see them probably on the screen. I found a place where I can pretty much kill monsters endlessly, as in it was a nice area where 3 of the same type of monster would respawn, and by the time I kill all of them, one of them respawns, and so as a result it was an endless cycle of staying in the exact same spot, killing one monster over and over. So I grinded those for a while, not too long, maybe 10 minutes I think, something like that, until I got bored and then I moved on. Shortly after that I moved away from this area, and since it was getting quite late and I had to go to sleep soon, I decided I would do a couple of more quests and then log off for the day. This is when I met the ancient weapon monster or elite or whatever it is. It looked quite scary at that time, especially because its name is red and the level is marked with question marks and he walks around, it's quite big. It was an interesting monster. Even to this day I have no idea what he is supposed to be. An elite? Do you need a party to kill him? Can you even kill him? It was just simply an interesting fact to bring up. But yeah, at this point I went to sleep, that was it for the day, and then I remembered that the next day I pretty much spammed the level 33 dungeon. So during the following day I started to notice that it was getting slower and slower to level up, and the quests were starting to feel way too repetitive. So I thought to myself, why not spam the level 33 dungeon, get maybe a full set of armor, just enjoy some time with other people and play the game as a party experience. Basically I was bored of playing solo. During this phase of spamming the level 33 dungeon, I actually had a really nice experience. The parties were pretty nice. I had fun with one of them. We were all Smurfs, or I'm not sure what is the name for the race that I'm playing, but my race, 4 out of 5 members were that, so we were all Smurfs, and once the 5th member entered the dungeon, we actually were all disappointed because he was a human or elf or whichever, so we were like, oh, our queen, you are the only person who is not a Smurf. So yeah, I had fun spamming this 33 dungeon. I think I did it at least 8 to 10 times that day. We had some PvP instances outside of the dungeon with the opposing faction. We actually did fight as a party versus them, so it was nice. In the end I didn't get my full set of level 33 armor, but I did get some experience, a lot of fun. It was in any case better than playing the game on my own, just doing the main questline solo. Let's see, what else comes next? The repair and PvP. Oh yeah, at some point I left the dungeon. You can't really repair around the level 33 dungeon, and I didn't know that you can carry some item that allows you to repair your armor from your inventory, so I had to leave the entire place to repair my armor. During that time I got some more PvP action. I'm not sure if I should have mentioned it, it just seemed be casual PvP, but yeah. After this, for the first time ever, I opened my UI to scroll through the quests and whatever tabs were there, and I realized that all of the hunting quests that I've done so far, besides offering me experience, which I thought it was the only reward, they also offer you some items that you have to pick up yourself from the UI. So I had a lot of those to pick up. I didn't even know that I have something to claim, so I claimed quite a lot of those items. I can't remember the name, I'm too lazy to check whatever it is, but you can see it on the screen. I had a lot of those, the items that you melt to get the concentrated stones to enhance your armor, so there's that. Let me check. You dismantle them to get condensed magic stones, so there's that. I dismantled all of them, got a lot of stones, used a couple of them. This is actually the first time when I spammed the dismantle option so many times, and I haven't seen so many condensed stones at this point. Later on I would get a lot more, but at this point in the game I was actually, wow, I'm so rich, but no, I'm not. If you saw my previous Bless Online video, which 99% of you probably didn't, you may remember that in this area I had my first duel. So yep, this is when another paladin approached me asking if I can duel him for the dailies. At that point I didn't even know what dailies he's talking about, or if there even are daily quests. He just simply had to kill a paladin in a duel, I suppose. So that was my first duel experience. I did lose the duel, and I actually remember I was like, it's not fair, he has better gear because he was level 37, so I assumed he had some level 37 gear pieces. In any case, I lost the duel, and shortly after that, after getting to level 37 myself, this is when I moved on, and it is time to talk about the level 37 dungeon. For me, the level 37 dungeon was kind of a wake-up call, because this is when I realized that all of the dungeons are going to be pretty much the same. I am a paladin, I already said that in the beginning of the video. When I was level 33, I didn't have all of my chains unlocked, so I was kind of hoping that the higher I get in level and I unlock all of my chains, the dungeons would get harder and it would be somewhat of a challenge to actually do the dungeons. But I was mistaken, because the level 37 dungeon was actually quite easy. I spammed it a couple of times, maybe between 2 and 4 times, until I was certain that it would be a very boring experience. As a paladin, my main role is to be a healer. 2 out of 4 of my tactics are healing tactics. Out of those 2, only one of them is required to be a healer, and the best one is the sacrifice tree. On this sacrifice tree or stance, that's the proper way, you have only one chain that you need to spam to be an efficient healer. There are 2 buff spells that I can use every now and then, but they are not really that relevant and they have long cooldowns, so that leaves me with only one single chain that I have to spam to actually heal my party and keep them alive. I can even alt tab between windows for between 10 and 30 seconds and my party would still be fine and alive, because the healer role at that time, I'm not sure if it got patched, as in if they nerfed the heals, but at that time being a healer was way too easy, and as a result I kind of lost hope in the dungeons, and that's why I say that the level 37 one was a huge disappointment. Now, I do realize that this is not going to be the case for every class. In fact, I'm pretty sure this is only going to be valid for paladins. For example, DPS classes, I'm sure they don't need to spam only one chain to be efficient. Same for tanks, for berserkers and whatever else. So maybe it's just simply the fact that paladin itself was meant to be a boring class, I don't know. Anyway, from the perspective of someone who plays a paladin, me, I found the dungeons got boring really quickly. Spamming one single chain was not fun. I mean, in the beginning it was nice, especially when you run the dungeon for the first time, because you explore it, you learn the boss mechanics, you talk to your party, find out how you need to kill them and stuff like that. But once you already ran the dungeon once and you need to repeat it a couple of times, a lot of times, to get your full set of armor, it gets boring to have to repeat or spam just one spell. So there was that. After the level 37 dungeon, I didn't even get my full level 37 set of armor, so I decided I would buy the entire set, or basically whatever pieces I was missing, from the market to complete my armor, because I had no intention to return to the level 37 dungeon. I already saw how it looks, I saw how the bosses work, it was nothing else left to be explored, except maybe spam it because I had a party. After the entire part of buying my armor, I learned that you can actually kill elite monsters to farm them for money. The first elite that I started hunting was the one in front of the level 37 dungeon, because to be honest that's the first one I ever saw as an elite, and I learned from my party, who was actually, one of the parties was waiting at the entrance. They were just simply switching the two channels over and over each 15 to 30 seconds to kill the same elite on those two channels over and over. So I thought to myself, why not do that on my own? And I did that for a while until I noticed that there were too many people sitting in front of the level 37 dungeon, and sometimes they would be from the opposing faction. So I decided, why not search online for a map of all of the elites and just simply find a different one and grind that one for myself to get myself a lot of money, enhance my gear, basically experience something different. Also, to point in this time, I found the Gathering Dungeon a couple of more times. I entered the Gathering Dungeon. I actually, since I found the dungeon I believe twice, I decided I would start the timer and collect the items from different rooms of that Gathering Dungeon, just to experience or just to see what is in each room of that dungeon, even though even up to this day all of the items are sitting in my bank because I have no idea what to use them on. Still, I decided, let me collect them to have them there for the future. Now, this part with the elite hunting was honestly the most interesting part in the entire game. Besides exploring the dungeons and exploring the map and doing the main questline and so on, hunting the elites felt for the first time like I was actually grinding, as in proper grinding. I basically found this harpy elite that was in a pretty remote location. It was around my level, it had nice drops, so I stayed around that harpy place and I killed the harpy a lot of times. I think I stayed there about 1 hour and 1.5 hours, something like that, killing it over and over. I even had some PvP instances where some other players obviously were coming around the harpy, and if they were from the opposing faction, which in my case it was, I think it was only one guy or two of them, I had some PvP experience, so it didn't get boring. But after about 1.5 hours I left the harpy place because my inventory wasn't that big and I had a lot of items, and I wanted to see, do they even sell? How much money do I make out of this? Is it worth it to return after I empty my inventory and redo the process over and over? So I went to the city. I tried to place as many of the level 37 weapons that drop from the harpy on the marketplace. A few days later, I kept on checking the marketplace. They don't really sell, so that was a disappointment. Maybe that changed in the last 2 weeks when I didn't play the game, but 2 or 3 weeks ago the 37 weapons didn't really sell, so that was a huge disappointment. The other item that I can get from the harpies were the condensed stones, the one used to level up your gear, and I actually did get a lot of those, and I really mean a lot. I got a few hundred of them after dismantling the items from the harpy. I got a few hundred of those stones. I used them on my armor, and just from hunting this elite for about 1.5 hours, I was able to get enough of those stones to get a full set of +5 level 35 armor, including my weapons. So grinding the elite 1.5 hours was enough to get my entire armor enhanced, and at that point I realized that I need a different type of stone to enhance it further to +6, and that the stones required to get your armor up to +5, the condensed stones, you can see them on the screen, those as well don't sell on the marketplace. So another disappointment. Maybe it's because around that time too many people stopped playing Bless, or I just simply had bad luck, or the economy was broken, but still the weapons from the elite didn't really sell. A couple of them sold, but took quite a lot of time. The condensed stones, again, I sold maybe 5 or 15 in total, and the other ones are still in my bank. So I ended up with the conclusion that if I were to return back to the Harpy, I would not make any profit because the items don't sell. You can do this once for the first time when you get your gear and you want it enhanced to +5 fast, but once you have it to +5, there's no reason to hunt elites, which is quite sad. After hunting these elites and enhancing my gear, I decided let me look through the map of elites and actually find different ones and see if I get a different result from those. I did find 2 or 3 more elites around the same area and around the same level. I killed them and they didn't turn out to be as efficient to grind as the Harpy elite. So at that point, I also found the Gathering Dungeon again, so there's that. If you look on the ground, you can find the helmet to enter the Gathering Dungeon quite often. But once I stopped looking for these elites, I think I was still, no, I think I got to level 40 or 41 around there, maybe 40, but the last entry on my note, on my journal here, is finally found another city with a town. So after I stopped hunting elites, I just simply proceeded to do my main quest line a little bit more, and after a while I arrived in this city. You can find it on the screen, which finally is a place where I can access my bank. I'm pretty sure there are other cities where you can access your bank, but I'm sure there is no other city where you can use the marketplace besides Spezia. I mean, at least for my faction. So since this is my last entry, basically after I hunted all of those elites, I did the main quest line up until level 41 or so, and this is when I started to gradually lose interest in Bless Online. Why? Because the questing felt repetitive, the PvP didn't really feel that engaging because, especially as a paladin, I only have one single stance that is useful in PvP. If I combine the interruption tactic and one of the healing tactics, in my case the sacrifice one, I am pretty much unkillable. I'm sure they're going to patch it, but at that time I could, as a level 40 or even level 39, I could kill level 45 players without much of a problem, especially if they were mages or rangers. So I didn't find PvP that engaging. Questing was starting to feel way too repetitive, especially after doing it so much. Dungeons were not challenging enough, and as everyone complains, there isn't much content in the game. So I slowly lost my interest after the initial hype of the game kind of wore off, and I experienced the world and most of what the game has to offer. I didn't get into the crafting systems and whatever else small stuff you can do, but I felt like I got my enjoyment out of the game and I returned back to playing Black Desert. So this is my experience with Bless Online. This video, I'm sure it's going to be quite long, probably half an hour or more. I appreciate if you made it this far. I hope you actually learned something from this video. If you didn't buy Bless Online yet, you will most likely experience at least 80% of what I talked about, because leveling up to 41 is the same process for everyone. You may be in a different faction and have slightly different main quest line, but still. I didn't make it all the way to 45, I know that is the end game, but I'm pretty sure the level 43 dungeon is going to be just as boring from a healer perspective, so I didn't feel the need to level up all the way to that. And since pretty much everyone complains there isn't much content in the game, I didn't feel the need to push my gear to enhance it as much as possible, especially when I kept on having this feeling that paladins are way too powerful and no one can actually kill me in PvP. So this marks the end of the video. That was my journey. I had fun with the game for the duration that I played it. After getting to 41, I felt like my fun kind of ended, so I returned back to my old habits of playing Black Desert. Thanks for watching again, and yeah, I hope to see you in a totally different video, and bye bye. PS, at the end of the video, if I see relevant changes in Bless, I will most likely return, and if I end up playing it again, I will just continue this video and make the rest of the road to endgame. So yeah, bye!